Hi, in my last video, I talked a little bit about this projector and a little bit about this lens and what my research into both of them had turned up. In this video, I'll go over some of the additional problems I found with this, but mostly we're going to be taking this apart and cleaning it to try to get the obstruction out of the lens. In my last video, I said that this bellows was in relatively decent shape, at least the parts of it that I could see. Unfortunately, I've had the chance to inspect it a little bit more closely since then, and it's really not. If I extend the bellows and shine a light from the outside, I can see quite a few pinholes and tiny cracks up in the top corners of the bellows. And unfortunately, the bottom of the bellows is much, much worse. It was originally covered in bits of paper, fluff, and other debris. And looking inside, after cleaning out most of that with a vacuum actually, I can see that the bellows material itself has been somewhat damaged by whatever mouse or other small rodent made its home in there. A good bit of the fabric there is badly frayed, and there are some major cracks and gaps in the bottom of the bellows when it's extended. Unfortunately, I don't think the bellows are really salvageable. Better off being replaced if anyone was going to try to restore this, in addition to all of the work restoring the rust on the actual lamp house back here. The best selling point of this projector still is that the vast majority of the chrome work on the frame and stand is still intact, and that the two major glass lenses here in the center are fully intact, and most of the other ones I've seen for sale have cracked lenses. But that is the last we're going to be seeing of this projector for a little while, as we focus instead on the lens. First thing we need to do is get it apart. This is going to be a little bit difficult. It's been stuck together in its current configuration, the fully assembled configuration with the unfortunate barrel modifications, for at least, my guess is, the last 100 years. And before I handle this too much more, I'm going to glove up, just because I don't want to get the oils from my fingers on parts of the lens that have not seen any human touch in a long, long time. I want to minimize any harm I might be doing to the brass and material of this lens. And luckily, the lens hood threads are moving very freely here. There we go. Next up, we'll try to remove the flange. That's taking a little bit more force, but it is moving, as you can see, and easing up as we go. I'm gonna try to probably clean these, make sure there's no debris stuck in the threads before I try to put anything back together here. I don't want anything caught in these threads that might damage the machine work here. The front elements are a cemented doublet, and the rear elements are an air-gapped doublet. I'm eventually going to want to remove all of them to clean them, but I think I'll start with the rear elements if I can. Unfortunately, the machined teeth on the back rim here that were probably there to aid in getting a grip on them to remove this rear element look pretty worn down, so it looks like someone over the years spent a lot of time trying to remove that. Oof, that is taking not inconsiderable effort, but it is moving, and it is getting a little easier as it does. I'm gonna, foreseeing a bear of a time putting this back together carefully without hurting anything. You can see it's already forming a gap here at the edge. There we have it. So it'll be a little while before I try to get into that. I'll try to clean this in situ first before seeing about opening it up, because if I can remove the majority of the water spots and grime from both sides of this housing, and there's negligible dust and dirt between them, then I won't need to take this apart at all. But I suspect that I'll want to take this apart to get the glass as clean as new. Importantly, now we can actually see the inside of the barrel fully. And I can reach in and very carefully just take hold of that obstructing bit of fabric and remove it. Do a little look at it, and it does look very much like the kind of leatherette that was being applied to the exterior of cameras of all sizes and makes, throughout the early to middle 20th century. There are a couple of other pieces of similar tape in here. I'm going to go ahead and remove them just because I don't want them to eventually come away on their own. Oh. This looks more like just black masking tape, no texture or leatherette appearance. And that was covering the spot inside the lens where the post was soldered in for the twist to focus mechanism. I'll probably just go ahead and leave this area exposed. It will be simpler and probably ultimately less harmful to the lens than having something else that might come loose in the future. Looking at this lens from the inside and now being able to see it more thoroughly from the outside, we can see that there's a screw hole that's been drilled through the inner barrel of the lens. I'm not sure what that was for, but we can also see here that where this slot was cut, you can see a portion of the original rectangular hole that the gear wheel would have sat in for the rack and pinion focusing, and two of the original 4 mounting screw holes that would have been used to hold that gear wheel in place. Looking at this additional band of brass that's been kind of crudely soldered on here, looking at it at a very oblique angle, one can actually see the edges of the other 2 screw holes. So it looks like all 4 screw holes are actually intact, and maybe someone a little bit more brave than myself could remove the solder, remove this extra strip of brass, and have access to most of the original rectangular hole and all 4 original screw posts, and replace this soldered post with an original toothed gear wheel and actually restore the original focus function of this lens. But now, onto the final disassembly. I'm going to go ahead and remove the front element of the lens if I can. Hopefully it will turn out to, oh, that's much gentler than the rear element was. I'm going to have to pay special attention to cleaning the threads on that rear element to make sure that it's able to go back in very cleanly and smoothly as this front element is doing. I am pleasantly surprised at how easy that was. And now I will have very easy access all the way through this barrel for cleaning, and complete access to the front element. Cemented as it is, it should not have any interior dust or debris or spots. If it does, I'll not be able to access them, and that's okay. Now I'm going to set aside the brass components, and we'll clean those separately in a little while. But first, we're going to turn our attention to the glass. What I've got here is a solution of 2 parts filtered water, 1 part isopropyl alcohol, and a single drop of liquid dish soap. So hopefully that'll be enough to break up any grease that's on there and help me get them fully clean while being gentle enough and easy enough to dry that they won't leave any residual water spots. And first up, we're going to tackle the front element of the lens. It has some spots, some pitting, some difficult to identify marks, and a large amount of dust. Hopefully we'll be able to clean this up good as new. And I'm using a microfiber cloth today just to make sure I'm picking everything up off the lens as quickly as possible without introducing any additional dust or debris. And I'm just going to gently pat it dry to pick up some of that debris before giving another quick rinse. I'm using a dish here to catch any of the debris that's coming off. And already it's looking quite a bit cleaner. Some material right at the edge of the lens that's going to be a little bit hard to see, but I'm just going to hit it with a little bit more of this very mild solvent solution. Again, we don't want to risk damaging any of the original material that's cementing this into the brass. We don't want to change the surface properties of the glass at all. That's why we're working with very diluted everything and just trying to get any dust, dirt, debris, old grease, fingerprints, anything that's on the lens. Just go ahead and very gently remove it. And already we're seeing most of the spots that were on the glass are gone, and I'm very happy with the results so far. And once this dries completely, I've got an air blower I'll be using to get rid of any dust from the cloth or any dust from the air around me that managed to settle onto the surface. Okay, now we have a much cleaner front lens element. Looking at it in glancing light, you can see just a little bit of marks on there, a couple of very faint scratches, one or two tiny bubbles inside the glass, little inclusions. Those are not at all uncommon of lenses of this vintage and usually have no impact whatsoever on the images they create. And now we have one very clean front element, more than up to the task of generating new images. Now I'm going to tackle cleaning the rear element. It seems to be significantly dirtier. I don't know to what extent that is in the air gap between the two elements. I'm going to attempt to clean it externally first without disassembling it, because I want to minimize how much I might introduce into the air gap. Immediately there is something of a hollow sound just when putting the cleaning solution onto the inside rear element here. Let's go ahead and give this a light, very gentle wiping now that we've let it soak into those deposits. And very quickly it's picking everything up, picking up all that dirt, grime, and dust. Just looking at cleaning one side of the outside, it does look like in order to get rid of some of those what appear to be water spots inside these two elements, I am going to want to disassemble this, get this apart so I can clean both sides of both elements. Let's go ahead and get this apart. Let's see if it wants to move. Oh, freeze up immediately. That is good news. Pull this retaining ring off of here, very carefully keeping the glass low to the surface, so if anything falls, it won't have far to fall. Let's see if I can let that glass fall free. And there we have it. The two elements separated. I will leave this one for, it can be removed as well, but for the moment I'm going to leave it in that housing. Now, very carefully, this one was positioned there with the convex face facing the interior of the lens, just making sure that I retain the information for what the orientation of each element was so that I can restore them precisely as they were. Now this element has a minuscule scratch on it. I don't anticipate that this is going to significantly impact image quality, but it is something to be cautious of and to note for as I'm cleaning. Starting from the middle of the glass and very, very gently work my way toward the edge, moving any dust, debris that's left on there by the cleaning solution away from the center of the lens. There appear to be some additional very faint and minor scratches. Surrounding that central scratch, probably cleaning marks. That would be my guess. Someone attempting to clean that up, maybe thinking it was a hair. It's my hope that if I'm doing anything ill-advised here, that if I'm making a terrible mistake, that someone in the comments will offer me some correction. And now we have a very clean and dry element from the rear. We will carefully remove this element and the brass spacing ring that separates the two. This lens, again, just checking the orientation, making sure that I'm going to be able to put it back exactly as it was. This one has a much thinner edge. This piece of glass is a biconvex lens element, so it bows out in the back and it bows out in the front. And I'm saying front because this is the part that would face toward the front of the lens. And at the moment it is configured so that the larger curvature is toward the front of the lens. I believe that is the normal configuration for a Petzval lens. If it turns out that I'm supposed to be orienting it the other way for maximum sharpness, we can flip that. But I know that some photographers do flip this rear element to obtain a more swirly, more pronounced out of focus area. But at the moment, I plan to return it to exactly its prior configuration, to the configuration I found it. After a thorough cleaning, of course. And even after just a few seconds of cleaning, this is looking much, much better. None of those big water spots anymore. Most of the dust and grime is gone. Just rotating it, there's much less edge on this lens for me to grip on. As with the front elements, there are some tiny, tiny bubbles and inclusions in this. So it will never look perfectly pristine the way a modern lens with modern glass might, but it will still produce very stunning, very interesting images. That, I believe, is as good and clean as that is going to get. I don't see the kind of water spots, the kind of dust and grime that had built up on it. I'm just going to very gently wipe it down, just to get rid of the last of the dust that had settled on it. And this, because this is a biconvex lens, there's no real safe way to set it down without setting it down directly on a face. So I'm going to place it on this microfiber cloth while I work. I'm going to go ahead and clear out just the brass for the rear lens grouping right now, so I can reassemble the rear lens group to keep it safe and keep it protected. Then I'm going to cover everything up and make cleaning the brass of the main lens barrel its own separate project. I think it needs a good bit of work to get rid of all of that adhesive gunk. But for now, I'm just going to use the same cleaning solution. Just let it get into the threads. Hopefully pick up any residue, any grease, any dust and debris that's worked its way into those threads over the years. I'm just going to gently, in the direction of the threads, wipe everything away, pick up dust and dirt of any kind. Just trying to get these clean. This is the outside. There is some intentional blacking of the inside of this lens group retainer, and I'm going to be very, very gentle on that inside because I don't want to be removing any of that intentional blacking if I can avoid it. After all, that helps cut down on glare and flare inside the lens and helps with the actual performance of the optics. Now to clean the inside, again, being extra gentle with the inside, both because we don't want to remove any of that original blacking if we can avoid it, and because we just want to be super careful with everything here. Clean, dry, and dust-free. And now we're going to very, very carefully reinsert the glass elements, being careful to minimize how much we touch them directly with our hands. Very carefully set the brass over the glass and then upend it directly in. Drop that in. Do the exact same procedure with that front element. Very cautiously minimizing any finger contact. Set that glass back on top. Press it very gently into place. Give it a final, very gentle wipe down. And slowly and carefully back this off until I feel it engage with the threading, and very carefully thread it down. Dry and clean and smooth. Just finger tight. Everything is solidly in place and very clean. All in all, I'm very happy with that. There are minor improvements that could probably be made over the state that I've produced, but I'd leave that to a real professional at some point in the future. I'm going to take this for a serious cleaning of some kind. There's quite a bit of residue from adhesives and other residues and dirt and grime that I do definitely want to remove from this, but I want to make sure that I'm not damaging the original finish, because quite a lot of this brass still has what appears to be the original 1850 lacquer on it, and I don't want to expose the metal surface under that lacquer without due cause. Additionally, I want to make sure that whatever I do to clean this barrel doesn't harm any of the soldering that's been done to it, doesn't harm the engraving with the original blacking inside it, and doesn't cause any damage to what's left of the original blacking material, blacking coating on the inside of the lens barrel here. Thanks for joining me as I bring this antique lens back to life. Made some good progress today getting all of the glass clean, but we still need to do a little bit of work on the barrel, even though we've got the major debris out of there. So join me next time as I finish cleaning the barrel, get everything reassembled, and start talking about mounting it to a camera. Thank you.